It is a little after 10:30, so I'll call our meeting to order. Looking for item number 1A is approve the order and contents of the overall agenda.
Move approval.
We have a motion to approve
Second.
and a second. Further discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you. Item number 1B is the review and action on the minutes from November 13th. They're included in the packet.
I'll make a motion.
We have a motion to approve. Second. And a second. Further discussion on the motion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Thank you. Item number 2 is our commission check-in, and I think we've probably realized that we've transferred chair, so I don't know if do you need an action on that? Okay, all right, but I just want to thank Commissioner Thorstad for his leadership over the last few meetings. Thank you very much.
Leadership is strong.
Leading us though, anyway. So thank you. So I guess we'll start with a commission check-in. Do you want to start on the end?
Sure. So this Sunday at the Fargo Theater at 2 o'clock, we're going to be showing Dreaming of a Better World, presented by Northern Plains Sustainable Agriculture Society. So this is a movie kind of pertinent today about some of the first farmers who realized that spraying wasn't really doing their land any favors, and what that has meant for them.
I have nothing.
You'll hear from me later, I guess.
All right.
No report.
Sounds good.
Nothing at this time.
Okay. All right. Clay County is in the middle of updating some ordinances that conflict each other. So the blueprints that we have created, I think we will be using for some dialogue on some of those to help shape that. So that's what I have. You want us to come back to you? Check in?
I think I'm ready.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Oh, you're
It's a
fine.
little ways from Horace. Chelsea Johnson, Horace City Council. Nothing to report, I guess.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Nothing. Nothing?
Nothing yet? Okay. All right, thank you. Item number 3, we have some certificates of appreciation for some members that have been serving here. Kim, do you want to?
I just wanted to acknowledge Nancy and Bucola's time on the commission. They served for 2 years, and we appreciate their service. And we've got some certificates that we're going to be mailing out to them. So thank you to Nancy and Bucola.
Yes, they did offer some vibrant conversations, so it was great to have their presence on this board as well. Item number 4, we have a recommendation to approve the appointment of an at-large member. Janice Tweet is here. Janice, would you like to say a few things about yourself? Introduce yourself.
Sure. Well, first, I'm Janice. My educational background is that I have a Bachelor in Arts in Political Science from the University of North Dakota. Also have a Master of Public Policy from the University of Minnesota. Spent a portion of my career working in legislative politics, both within the U.S. Senate and the Minnesota State Senate. And then a few years ago, transitioned to the nonprofit world and have been with the Great Plains Food Bank for the last 5 months or so as a community initiatives coordinator. I also, for the last 2 years, have been able to serve as the gleaning coordinator, and so just want to give a special thank you to the commission for addressing the issue of gleaning and putting forward a blueprint that we were able to implement here in the area, and I would look forward to being part of the great work the commission does.
Thank you very much, Janice. Adam, do you have anything else to add? I see that you are noted on the informational sheet. Okay, all right. Well, welcome. You certainly have a background that's wonderful, and we're excited about what your presence on this board could lead to. So, board wishes. There's a recommendation at the bottom of the informational sheet.
I'll make a motion.
Okay, we have a motion to appoint Janice to the commission.
Second.
And a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Passes. Welcome, Janice.
Thank you.
Okay. Our next item is our jurisdictional spotlight. The City of Moorhead, Sarah Watson-Curry is here. She will give an update on some of the initiatives. Well, you'll find that out about me.
Appreciate that. Let's see. All right. Good morning. My name is Sarah Watson-Curry. I serve on the Moorhead City Council, and I will try to honor our time as well and move forward. I've got some high-level information on some things that the city policy ordinances and activities that kind of align and dovetail into the Cass Clay Foods strategic plan that we were presented with. It's also kind of a nice presentation to look at when it's a very cold day, because there's a lot of like green things to look at with warmer temperatures. So the first thing I wanted to call attention to was some of the initiatives and actions towards local food access. Of course, these are during warmer days, so we have our Moorhead Farmers Market, which is managed by our Parks and Recs department. This past year it was hosted, I should say, with all of these, we have a lot of great community support and partners. So this past year we had the market in the Ace Hardware parking lot. It was June through September, 3:30 to 6 p.m. And really excited that we worked with community partners to accept snack benefits at the farmers market as well. One other small piece that we had back in our history, this was from 2013, is we had used some community block and development funds to acquire demolish and repair some blighted properties, and partnered with Dorothy Day Food Pantry to make sure that they had more accessibility for neighbors in need of that service, to make sure that they could access it safely. So that was also an important one our staff wanted to highlight. Compost and yard waste are things that we have facilities to process and also for folks to collect. We have yard waste compost sites, and we also do curbside pickup April through November. A lot of people don't know that we offer free mulch and compost, so I could give you some tips on packing your hatchback or small vehicle if you wanted to take advantage of that cost-saving feature. And we do also, within our ordinances, allow composting within our residential zone districts. And the ordinance is pretty easy to find on our city website and gives some specifications as far as location for composting, guidelines for what materials to put in it, and then maintenance to make sure there's no nuisance smells or any other pests within that as well. I apologize, this one has no green graphic. This is a lot of engineering planning language. We had some community members bring forth a plan to add a rain garden feature to their property, and it provided a robust conversation about the infrastructures and differences between simply boulevard plantings and rain gardens. Rain gardens, of course, have a higher infrastructure need, and there can be some safety concerns as far as safety concerns and property conversations in the right-of-way, to make sure that we have a clear understanding as far as whose responsibilities for if we had to replant or if we have to access a water and electricity line too. There is a permit application on our website as well. I believe it's a $40 fee for the rain garden, and there's also guidelines about planting and the maintenance standards, make sure people are safe and understand the responsibilities there. We are shoveling now instead of mowing, but we do also have an ability, if residents want to minimize how much they are mowing, we have a natural yard application. If you wanted to seed your entire lawn with something other than a conventional grass, there is an application, and have to get permission or file it so you have your neighbors have a chance to weigh in. There is a caveat that if you're just planting about 30% or some size limitations with the natural lawn, you wouldn't have to do the application or the notice process. So you could still minimize how much time you're spending with your lawn boy. And just by nature of being in Minnesota, there is, through Soil and Water Conservation, I believe, it's the lawns to legumes. There's lots of bee puns in this, so bear with me, but there is a grant program for people to do demonstration on a larger scale or to receive funding for residential property. And it's, again, minimizing how much, increasing access for pollinators. So these things do fit within our natural lawn policy. And there's some opportunities for homeowners to actually receive some money associated with the cost. I will say, if you do a search for flowering lawns in Minnesota, you'll find the application. The education and demonstration plots are due very soon. I think they're due on the 10th, but residential lots are due not due until the 28th of February. So you have some time there to take advantage of that program.
Sarah, I may also add that the Clay County Soil and Water Conservation District is great about helping residents. So if you want to just, residents can call Amanda or Kevin and talk to them in Moorhead, and they can guide them through that process.
Thank you, yes. Another one, long title, but a lot of great work, partnership with Audubon, Dakota, and their Urban Woods and Prairie Initiative. I'm really excited about this project. It includes natural plantings and woodland restoration. It's not just in Moorhead, but Moorhead is hosting 9 sites, and we have 9 that are started or are underway. And it's over 100 acres. It was previously, it's city-owned property we were just mowing. And so now it's being replanted with these native plantings. It's a really great partnership. Audubon coordinates all of the plantings and helps establish them for 3 years before they turn the property maintenance back over to the city. And that was grant funded through the Department of Natural Resources Conservation Program. And I just wanted to throw this on there. If you do a search for this too, you can see on the Fargo side that they are also benefiting from this program. So they're really beautiful spaces, and it's interesting because as they evolve, it looks a bit barren and is kind of scary as they're killing off the grass, but the end result is absolutely beautiful. Sort of some outliers here is and some community leadership as well. Riverkeepers proposed a community art and education program that was funded through our Arts and Culture Commission. They were lucky enough to to receive some grant money that was specified to fund Moorhead Proud community art projects. So the images you see are not in Moorhead, they're examples. It will be the project will be started in 2020, so this upcoming season. And they're going to be working with a number of neighborhood block groups and then partner them with an artist to embellish the drains and really remind people about keeping our water supply safe. So I think it's a really fun way for them to raise their mission and awareness about our safe water supplies. And some other community leaders, I'm sure I'm leaving some out as well, but there are 2 fairly large community gardens that are established in our community. The Moorhead Public Housing, the Riverview Heights building, they have, for the 2nd year, they have a garden, and it's a really great opportunity for them to address food security for their residents, but also interact with their staff, and community members and neighbors are welcome as well. I believe they garden, well, I won't mention it because I don't want to get the date wrong, but they garden once a week, and then participants take home a share of the food. Additionally, First Presbyterian Church has a similar model, and they also are entering their 3rd year, and have doubled actually the size of their garden from the first year that they did it. And a number of their parishioners donate their share of the food, so they try to spread the wealth, so to speak, to Churches United, Dorothy Day, and the food pantry as well. There is also, I should say, there's a job opportunity or some coordinator position that they fund, so they are actively looking for this upcoming season's garden manager. Some other things that kind of pop up in the community outside of the Rourke Art Museum, Longspur Prairie has a number of these micro prairies that they've inserted throughout the community. And again, it's just an opportunity to reduce maintenance for maybe annuals, establishing more perennials, creating an increased number of pollinators and native plantings. And then additionally, our own Parks and Rec Department offers an Adopt a Park and River program. Not a lot of food benefits there, but at least getting people outside and keeping those spaces safe and clean. I know we've had a presentation in the past from participants, Green Corps members, but we were recently awarded our 3rd step for the Green Steps Cities program, which is a voluntary program through the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. It essentially tracks efforts for sustainability and quality of life improvements. So pictured holding the 3 green steps as our Mayor Jonathan Judd, and so we had a number of council members receive the award at a League of Minnesota Cities conference. I tried to keep within the 10 minutes, so I don't know if anyone has any questions, but again, these are pretty high-level things, but our community is really proud of these efforts, and so are our staff as well, so I want to extend my kudos to them.
Great report. Sarah, did anyone have questions or comments for Sarah? I guess we could open it up to the public as well, if anyone has any questions in regards to the snapshot for Moorhead. If not, thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Moving into our item number 6, we have a Cass Clay Hunger Coalition. No, my 6 is different than this. Number 6 here is the Weed Biology and Ecology, the non-chemical weed control and weed management systems. I think, Noelle, will you be doing the introduction?
Yes. Good morning. Happy New Year, everyone. Continuing our focus on sustainability into 2020, we are going to be looking at the topic of pesticide and herbicide use in our community, both today and at our next commission meeting as well. So to give us kind of a high-level, big picture overview of weed management systems and why we manage them the way that we do and other strategies, we have Dr. Greta Graymig today, who is a weed scientist at NDSU.
Welcome, Greta.
Well, thanks, everyone. I'm glad to be here. Thanks to Noelle for the introduction and the invitation to talk with you guys today. I didn't have a lot of time to prepare this, so I hope it hangs together all right. So on a day like today, I often think to myself, why do I live here? And then in July, I know why, because we have the most wonderful summers, and we also have some of the most productive soils in the world. And so it's a really great place to grow things. But whenever humans are trying to grow things, we contend with something we call weeds, and that's what I'm here to talk with you about today. So first, getting into weed ecology, what is ecology? Ecology comes from the Greek word for household, which is oikos, and the Greek word for study, which is logos. So it means to study our household or our home, and the earth is our home. And so ecology is about studying the earth, and it's a pretty big topic. So it's a very difficult scientific discipline to be involved with, because essentially it's the study of everything. One thing to be aware of is what ecology is not. So if you do a Google image search, you'll come up with some images like this. And I always tell my students that the predominant thing I see is the color green. And people tend to conflate ecology with the green movement or environmentalism. And that's not really correct. Ecology is a scientific discipline, and as such, it's really value neutral. So that's something to keep in mind. To further get into what weed ecology is, we have to understand what a weed is. And generally when I pose this question, people will tell me, oh, it's a plant out of place. And yes, that is one of the standard definitions of what a weed is, and that would fall under the category of an anthropogenic definition. It's informed by an anthropogenic viewpoint. So who decides that plant is out of place? We do. But there are other ways of looking at weeds that might be a little more useful than just in relation to humans and what we want or need. One of these is the ecological viewpoint. And this is recognizing that, in fact, weeds may not be plants out of place, but they are perfectly in place. They have evolved to fulfill a certain function in ecosystems. And in particular, weeds that colonize annual systems tend to be colonizers. And their job is to come into an area that's been disturbed and repair it. And then finally, we have a biogeographical viewpoint, and this pertains to species that are dislocated from their home range, and they are introduced where they become exotic or alien. And so those are some ways of thinking about weeds. And so in trying to manage weeds, humans have battled with them for centuries, and prior to synthetic herbicides, we controlled weeds by pulling them up and hoeing them and trying to kill them with various different substances like sodium arsenite, or maybe salt was another one, various acids like acetic acids. But one of the problems with that is that the substances like salt or acetic acid are non-selective. And so a great revolution came in 1946 when 2,4-D was first marketed. And 2,4-D is a broadleaf herbicide. It specifically kills broadleaf plants and not grasses. And so it's selective. It only kills certain plants. And that revolutionized managing weeds with chemicals. And then in 1996, we further upped our game by introducing genetically modified crops that are resistant to herbicides. So we love our herbicides. They're the easy button. They work really well, and unfortunately, they also pose some challenges. So there are some environmental concerns with relying too heavily on herbicides. Many of these compounds are very persistent in the environment, and they can cause problems for human health. I think we've all heard of the lawsuits going on surrounding glyphosate. That's a very controversial issue, but it is a matter that people are concerned with. In the environment, an example, you see the little frog on the screen. There was a very famous scientist from Stanford who showed that very realistic levels of the herbicide atrazine caused these little frogs to express both sexual characteristics, so it was disturbing the reproductive systems of these little frogs. And then there are economic concerns. Sometimes it's just not really economically feasible to rely on herbicides solely. And then herbicide resistance is a growing problem whereby some plants are becoming resistant to herbicides. So how can we address these challenges? Weed scientists suggest that an integrated approach is really the best. And so instead of relying just on herbicides, we want to combine a bunch of different tactics that you see here on the slide. And that can often be a little bit more stable and resilient. Systems that are multi-tactic are a little bit more stable. So the basic idea is we want to use a variety of tactics and not just rely on one thing, which is typically herbicides. So getting back to weed ecology, we can use the science of weed ecology to understand systems, and then that understanding leads to the development of integrated weed management systems. And so weed ecologists study the interactions between crops and weeds, and then how they interact with the other biotic components of the environments, the animals, the microorganisms, and then how all those organisms interact with the abiotic environment. And so we want to understand why weeds are where they are in relation to these interactions. All right, so switching gears a little bit, I know that this group is interested in food systems, and one way to increase access to good food is to grow your own. I very firmly believe that, because whenever you pay someone else to grow your food, it's going to be costly. And I'm really interested in trying to increase access of healthy food to disadvantaged people, people who maybe just don't have enough money to buy food at the farmer's market. And so, but a lot of people might think, why even bother doing this? Why grow food in cities? We have grocery stores, we have farmers. But this is a long list of reasons why it provides an opportunity for education and community development. You can reduce the food miles that your food travels. That reduces greenhouse gas emissions. It increases access to fresh produce. And gardening in cities can provide very badly needed ecosystem services, such as resources for pollinators. It promotes human health to have access to homegrown foods. And finally, growing gardens can help regenerate lands in cities that have become degraded. So those are some good reasons for doing that. But right now, probably in most cities, the most prevalent crop that's being grown is lawns. And there's a long history of growing lawns. People have been doing this for hundreds of years. It's definitely something that mostly rich people participated in at first, and so it became a status symbol. And a lawn like the one you see in the picture on the left, it's solid green grass, it's trimmed very short, it's neatly edged, there's no weeds in sight. That's a sign of being an upstanding citizen, right? You know, I've got a great solid character and I do all this hard work to produce this beautiful lawn. But unfortunately, achieving this lawn comes at some very high costs. Lawns occupy 40 million acres in the United States. They consume 30% of the fresh water. Every year we pour 90 million pounds of synthetic fertilizers and 78 million pounds of pesticides on our grass to achieve this pristine, beautiful lawn. And not only are these things costly, but a lot of them are in conflict with growing gardens. Sometimes lawns and gardens don't really mix very well, and that's because the herbicides that we use to control weeds in our yards do damage to crops. Last summer, I had a bunch of my strawberries damaged very severely by someone's lawn chemicals, and I've had numerous other incidents where my gardens were damaged by lawn chemicals, and I'm sure I'm not the only one. I live in North Fargo, by the way. And so why is this? It's because herbicides that are used on lawns can easily move off target. For one thing, when you're spraying the chemicals, as this fellow is doing in the picture, the wind can carry that herbicide to places where you don't want it to be, your flower beds, your shrubbery, your vegetable garden. Also, when you spray on a really hot day, this is what happened last year when my strawberries were damaged. Someone was spraying on a very, very hot, humid day, and this causes the chemicals that have settled on the lawn to re-volatilize into the air, and it creates a little cloud, and they can drift around and land on places where they're not intended to be and cause damage. And some of the chemicals used in lawns, like 2,4-D and dicamba, are especially prone to volatilization. There are forms, so there are ester and amine forms, and the amine forms are safer, and also dry products are safer. So it's much safer to apply the weed and feed granular products and water them in than to hire a lawn service that sprays these chemicals. And then at the bottom of the slide, you can see a bunch of the crops that are especially at risk. Some crops and plants are more prone to being damaged by these chemicals than others. And so what can we do? What can we do to solve this problem? And how can we use weed ecology to design yards that reduce the conflict between yards and food production in urban landscapes? And basically, you could boil down a plant ecology class into a 1-minute lesson, which is shown here on this slide. One is that nature abhors a vacuum. If there's an empty niche, you're going to have something. And with respect to plant communities, it's usually going to be a plant that we think of as a weed coming in to fill that niche. And then the second thing is to make sure all your niches are filled, you want to have really high species diversity. When you have a diversity of different species, annuals and perennials, grasses and broadleaves, those plants naturally occupy different niches in the ecosystem. So they fill up the niches and they make it resilient to invasion from weeds. So these systems are more stable and they're more resilient. All right, so how can we apply these concepts to creating beautiful lawns that are also more ecologically sound? And I was really happy to hear Sarah talking about the initiatives in Moorhead, because one of the problems, of course, is the laws surrounding how we keep our lawns. But these are some ideas for how we could make yards more resilient to invasion by weeds and more ecologically sound. So there's a no-mow concept where people are planting mixes of fescue species, and that's in the picture on the left. And you can see that it looks a little different. It looks like a yard that needs to be mowed, right? But a lot of this is just in our head, what we think of as being beautiful. And I think that we could easily shift our mindset and say, wow, that looks really beautiful. It's lush, it's green, I don't see any weeds popping up. And the reason is it's just a lot taller and there's nowhere the weeds can get in. There aren't any niches. It's filling all those niches. And then another thing that you could do, which might be a little bit easier, you don't have to replant your whole yard, is just throw some white clover seed out there and get some forbs growing in your grass. This is what I've done at my house. And this adds some species diversity, and the clover will fix some nitrogen so you can reduce your fertilizer use in your yard. And then some other ideas are to just mow less often. Last summer, I only mowed every other week. And I think once in the spring, my boyfriend and I spent 1 hour pulling dandelions. 1 hour, that's all it took. And my yard looked relatively weed-free for the rest of the summer. And I didn't have to use any chemicals. I didn't spend a lot of time mowing, and I was disturbing my neighbors less by mowing less. Another thing that you can do that's really important is to not remove all that organic matter. Use a mulching mower and return those clippings to the soil. And then finally in the fall, this is something I tried for the first time. I'm just really tired of raking all these leaves. It takes so much time, and you're removing all that valuable organic matter from your system. And so there's a concept whereby you can just mulch mow the leaves into the grass. And I gave it a try, and it worked really well. And there's some research from Michigan State University where they showed that after 2 years of using this approach, people had 100% fewer dandelions and crabgrass in their yards. And those are the two most prevalent weeds that we struggle with in turf grass systems. So that's a really good idea too. And there's so many benefits associated with managing lawns more naturally. So in this picture, it says this lawn costs $0 in the past year. So it's cheaper. It is less labor. I spend so much less time on my yard than my neighbors do. It's safer for pets and children. One of the reasons I made the switch is I have a cat, and I think about the cat out there with its little paws, and it's licking its little paws, and it's eating those chemicals. You're reducing fuel consumption and noise pollution. By the way, another great tip is get a battery-powered mower. They're so wonderful. And then you're not harming all the other plantings that you're trying to grow. And these yards are really beautiful once you shift your mindset a little bit. But there are some barriers to achieving ecologically balanced lawns and practicing these more natural lawn care techniques. And one of the main things is that the neighbors may be upset. So people have been very conditioned to believe that yards have to be a certain way. I think that we need to work really hard to change this. And it was great to hear that Moorhead has some laws in place that are allowing for some of these sorts of things to occur. I don't know what the laws are in Fargo, but certain cities may have ordinances that prevent this kind of approach. And so what all of you can do to change things is to, one, start practicing these types of approaches if it's legal, so people get used to it and people will see that it's kind of nice, and talk to your friends and neighbors about these approaches and their benefits. And then finally, which I think a lot of people in this room are working to do, and thank you so much, is to work to change the laws so that we do these things. And so that's all I have for you today. And if you have any thoughts or questions, I'm all yours.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gramick. Are there any questions or comments on the presentation? I have an overzealous 13-year-old who has a dream of owning a lawn care operation, and last year we were able to restrict him from mowing the grass every other day so that it was to just letting it grow a little longer, because if you leave it a little longer, it really does keep it healthier, I guess, is what we observe.
It really does. Just that little thing does help a lot.
Questions?
Right. Well, thanks, you guys.
Yes, thank you very much. Okay, moving into number 7. Whitney Oxendahl is here to present our next speaker.
Hello, everyone. I'm Whitney. I help write the research and write the documents, if you haven't met me before. And our next speaker, we're shifting a little bit, our gears a little bit, to think about public land. So we're thinking about school grounds, parks, right-of-way systems. So instead of thinking about our lawns, we're thinking about the city's lawns. And to talk about their processes is Mike Schroeder. He's from the City of Moorhead Parks Department. He's the Parks Maintenance Manager. So he will talk for a bit, and then you can feel free to ask him questions. So here's Mike.
You guys did a really good job of creating a conversation about lawns on the coldest day of the year thus far. So got me excited for summer.
Hi, my name is Mike Schroeder. I'm the Park Maintenance Manager of the City of Moorhead. I've been in this position for only 2 years, but the previous 24 years I was the Assistant Superintendent at Village Green Golf Course in Moorhead, and I have been licensed by the state of Minnesota for the last 27 years with a pesticide applicator license. In Moorhead, we have around 1,100 acres of mowing areas, including parks, athletic fields, right-of-way, and storm ponds. When I first saw that, I was like, wow, town of Moorhead has that many acres that we have to take care of. But that's what we have. I have a couple questions I was asked is, why is it important for parks to control noxious weeds? A noxious weed is a weed which is considered to be harmful to the environment or animals. One of the ones we have the toughest time with is Canadian thistle. We have trouble controlling it. It is on the control list in Minnesota, which means efforts must be made to prevent the spread by reducing established populations and preventing reproduction of this weed. This weed was native to Europe. It was introduced to the United States and Canada in the 1600s. It is now widespread throughout the US and Canada. It's an aggressive perennial with vigorous root systems that continually produces new shoots, invading new areas and out-competing other vegetations. The plant is highly invasive, degrades wildlife habitat, and can hinder reforestation and landscape restoration efforts. Once a population gets established, it begins to quickly displace any native vegetation that's in its way. But management plans that combine fall and early spring applications of specific herbicides and pre-flower mowing throughout the growing season have shown to produce excellent results. Especially when the follow-up management occurs for several years until the population is significantly reduced. Restoration of treated areas by fostering existing or newly planted site-specific native plant species can also sustain management in these areas. Another question was process in deciding when and where to spray. In the city of Moorhead, we spot spray. It's post-emergent. We just don't go spray all 1,100 acres of grass. The best time for our spraying I'd like to do is fall herbicide applications. It's cooler. And September to mid-October, depending on the weather, but the last couple falls, it hasn't been very good because winter hits about September. It's the best because weeds are transporting their food from their foliage to their roots in preparation for winter, so that it's trying to suck in as much stuff as it can. So that way you don't have to use as much herbicide. You can tone down your application. But like I said, the last couple of falls, it hasn't been very good. So what we do is spring and fall. Summer we don't hardly ever spray unless we have to for some reason, because what was mentioned about the heat, we don't do that. In summer too, these broadleaf weeds produce a thick cuticle, an adaptation to limit moisture loss during the heat and droughts. And in the fall, this cuticle is thinner, so that it can absorb more and there's no runoff. Another question was, how do we minimize risk to wildlife and humans? When we spray certain areas, we mark these areas with signs, and there's a date, time, sprayed, and staff until dry. Also has the Public Works phone number if they have any questions at all. We also monitor the weather very closely. Checks wind speed at every location. We do not spray when the wind is over 10 miles an hour, and we know how often that happens in Red River Valley, so we really have to watch the weather. It's up and down all the time. We usually spray the parks in early mornings when the parks are empty and the winds are usually lower. We also coordinate with our athletic fields and try to spray these areas when there's nothing going on for that day or that night. Also, the fall, like I said before, is a great time because usually the parks aren't as busy in the fall too. In the mornings, it's the best time to go out. Then any practice we have implemented to reduce chemical control, we've been talking about earlier today, was the Audubon, Dakota. Starting in 2015, we entered an agreement with Audubon, Dakota on a project called the Moorhead River Corridor Urban Woods Prairies Initiative, which we call the UWP. Its purpose is to make improvements to the city-owned properties designated as habitat restoration sites which are along the river corridor. These areas will preserve and enhance the habitat for birds and other wildlife along the river corridor. At the same time, providing vegetation that is beneficial in terms of water storage, filtration, purification, and flood mitigation. In these sites, the Audubon's contractors applies herbicides by spot spraying specific invasive species such as thistle, leafy spurge, and bird's foot trefoil. Typically, these are done only 2 to 3 times a year. They try to do as least as possible. We have 9 sites in the city of Moorhead. It helps reduce mowing and spraying. These are about 50 acres, but we have about 60 more acres that are not. We only mow twice a year along between the levees and the river. And those get the less mowing and only spray it twice a year. There's these 9 sites, and then we also found out just recently that Audubon's Minnesota CPL grant for the UWP initiative has been funded again for this again. With these funds, they will be expanding the impact of UWP and ensure that current acres receive effective long-term management. It's been a really good partnership with them. These areas, like Sarah was saying, they are really nice. And they take a while to get going, but once they get going, they're going to be nice. We have, I think, 6 of these sites are in their 2nd or 3rd year, so they're starting to get to where they're supposed to. And the Audubon Society, they take care of them for the first 3 years. But now with this new funds, it looks like they're going to expand that and take care of them for a longer period. That's what I have. Questions?
Any questions? Looks like you're getting off clean there.
Do you ever work with like the FM trail builders? Thinking of
Yep.
There's numerous bike paths along the river.
Yep.
So that they close the trails
Yep.
shortly after spraying.
Yeah, we work with them at the Gooseberry and MB Johnson. Yep.
Any other questions? People from the public, do you have any questions on the presentation? Thank you very much for the work that you do.
Thanks, Mike.
All right, our next item, item number 8, is the pesticide use on public lands issue. There's a brief and a snapshot, Whitney.
Hello, everyone. I'm back. I just want to give a big thank you to Mike Schroeder and to Dr. Greta Graymig. She had to head out, but for coming, Mike came kind of short notice. I think I let him know on Friday, and he was so lovely to come and join us. So thank you so much, Mike, for coming short notice for us. So you see before you two documents that this is the kind of the format we've fallen into that we feel best addresses issues for our community. So first, there's an issue brief. We will be looking at these again at the next meeting, so hopefully you'll get a chance to read through them and come back with questions. We're hoping to have Audubon, Dakota come and speak about their program here. So continue looking at these and coming up with questions. So the first one is an issue brief, and it talks about what's happening nationally. So kind of some background on pesticides, some of the challenges, especially in regulating them, because there are so many, and it's hard to test them. When they're testing them, it's challenging to test them on all types of wildlife. So they might look at honeybees, but what about wild bees? And so this issue really looks at pollinators a lot. How are they affecting pollinators? Especially here, it's an economic driver because North Dakota is the #1 honey producing state in the whole nation. So we want to keep these populations healthy. As Mike was saying, there are reasons we use them for noxious weeds. We need a control for these. These affect habitats. But how can we reduce them in an integrated way, as Dr. Graymig talked about? So the first one we'll talk about what's happening on the national level and what other communities are doing, especially implementing integrated pest management strategies at the city level in parks departments. And then another thing to look at, if we're looking at policy and laws, there are preemption laws at the state level. And so what is a preemption law? There are limits, statewide limits on what you can do at the local level regarding pesticides in most states. So 43 states, including North Dakota and Minnesota, have some restrictions on what the local level can do. If you're thinking about limiting or banning certain pesticides, if there's a concern, you can't always do that. So that's something to consider at the state level. And in Canada, they do not have those, and a lot of them have implemented, 170 cities have implemented some restrictions on especially cosmetic. So if you think residential lawns, they've restricted that use on residential lawns. And then the second one, which we'll be talking about more at the next meeting, is just a community snapshot for Cass and Clay. So this all started because this look at this issue. In 2017, there were some food organizations that wanted to start a community garden and an incubator farm. And they were working with Fargo in South Fargo on flood buyout land. And they were moving into the process of they had picked out some land that worked, and then Cass County Weed Control found out about it and said, I've been spraying this certain herbicide on there that you might want to reconsider because it has a few years soil residual, so it remains in the soil. So they had to find different land. So we just want to make sure we know what's happening in the different jurisdictions and how they're communicating with one another so that we can maybe plan for the future of farming. So maybe we have land set aside that people can do a community garden on. So we want to make sure that you guys know and the different jurisdictions know what's happening so that we can plan for food and plan for different activities we want on different land. So you'll see what each jurisdiction is doing in here and then some possible community actions. And I would love it if anyone would bring me different community actions that you think we can take to help with this topic as well. So feel free to connect with me or Kim and add to the back to the list of community actions on the back. So that is just a little bit about what's in these documents if you haven't read them. So does anyone have any questions for me about this topic so far? Mike.
Just one comment on
Yes.
page 3 of Exhibit 3B, the pesticides use on public land. Just a note under City of Fargo, it says contact Matt Anvik. He is now the West Fargo Public Works Director.
Oh.
Just started a couple days ago, so.
Okay,
I
I
just
will
want to note
get.
that change, so.
Thank you, Mike. I'm glad you're here to direct me.
Whitney, both, I can speak for Clay County, and I know Cass County has as well, their noxious weed lists. And those weed lists are different, what Minnesota deems noxious weeds and North Dakota deems weeds. And that's kind of been an issue for, say, a project in North Dakota buys gravel from a gravel pit in Clay County. If it needs to be certified weed-free, if the lists are different. In Minnesota, it's not really noxious weed-free in North Dakota. So there are limitations in that, and you know, Minnesota has quite a, I know you've got the Soil and Water Conservation District, but quite vigorous rules in terms of how we deal with those, and I think it's important to note in Clay County or research further the townships, what the townships are doing when they notice if there's a noxious weed. I know the highway department has kind of talked about a little bit in the Clay Soil and Water District. So there are some spots that you might be able to get some more information to add to this document through those contacts.
Do you want to look at just the process of what happens with noxious weeds in the townships, or look at specific townships?
Well, it depends on what you want this document to have. If we are wanting to use it as an educational document for citizens to know what and when things are getting sprayed, I think having conversations with those will probably help you to add to this. If I'm way off base.
Do you want me to look at every township, or would you
Well,
rather
no,
just me
Clay-
have a contact in there and just a
Right.
basic, like, this is how you go about contacting
Right.
someone?
All the townships, for the most part, in Minnesota or Clay County are doing the same thing based on
thing.
that noxious weed list. But
Okay.
but if you would like to add in this document what the townships of Clay County are doing, that could be
So it's a pretty
helpful.
broad, it's a procedure that's pretty similar throughout
Correct.
the townships. Okay, I will check into that, and I will get that added to this document for you to see at the next meeting.
Any other questions? Any other guidance for Whitney? Things that you may want to see on here that may not be on here?
Anything in the appendices that you want to see? I can add.
Did you want to add anything for Horace?
I mean, I could talk to them. I could.
Yeah, we can definitely have some discussions and then bring it forward at the next meeting.
Yeah, and if there's any kind of ordinances, I just looked at what the jurisdictions are doing. And if you guys want to see ordinances, specific language from other communities, let me know. You can respond to Adam's email or contact any of us on the steering committee, and they will get it to me, and I can look at ordinances if you want to go more policy related. So let us know.
You know, and just me thinking here, you know, I think it's important for the public to note our intention with these documents. And I think our intention as a whole is to not individually change what West Fargo or Horace is doing with the pesticide sprays, but just to have a conversation so that we all understand what's happening, specifically in Clay County on those flood buyout properties. What are there going to be residual effects of spray? You know, I think just to have the conversation. Am I correct?
Yes, this is just an educational document, so citizens can look and be like, what's happening in my jurisdiction? Who do I contact? Because a lot of these jurisdictions, aren't necessarily communicating this to one another. So I would reach out to planning, and they would direct me to all the places. So this is a document where they have easy access to this information. And then if they want to find out more or work on a thing with it, if they want to start educating other people about, like in their neighborhood, they could take a look at this and find resources as well. But it's not necessarily a policy document or leading to that. It's just an education.
Any other questions? Good work. Thank you, Whitney.
Thank you guys so much.
Well, that brings us into item 9, our public comment opportunity. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak to the commission on any issue? Anybody? You feel free to, all right. Come on up. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Jen Walla, and this is John Henry. We live in Moorhead. And we just wanted to to thank you for looking at and opening up this conversation. I've had a number of conversations with a number of people the last few years about what's happening with the sprays. Just a lot of us find mushrooms that we know that we know the identity of, so we're not in danger of that, but we don't know what other chemicals are in the area, or want to pick dandelions or other plants that also have a lot of uses. And so knowing what is sprayed and finding out where we can do that is a really valuable thing. And I'm part of a free forest school organization that meets in Fargo and Moorhead at the local parks once or twice a week, year-round. And we also often wonder, well, what has been sprayed, or how often, or where is that, so we can avoid that with our young children. And so I'm very appreciative of this, and the vote among me and most of the people that I've had conversations with has been to minimize applications, to try and keep things as diverse and natural, but also understanding that there needs to be a public committee about that. And if there's any interest in talking about a lot of uses of a lot of the plants and the benefits of them, I would be very glad to contribute to that on a long-term basis. So.
Well, thank you for your comments and feedback, definitely. Does anyone have questions?
I don't have a question, but I guess I just have like a piggyback comment that working with a lot of people in gardening who are from other countries, what we consider a weed, they consider very edible. And they do forage in our city spaces and park spaces for some of that. And I try to discourage it because I do know that there are things being sprayed out there and it might not be safe, but they're not always aware, or they may not have language skills to read the signs that are posted, or necessarily know that you need to look for that tiny little sign on the side of the sidewalk as you enter the park before picking something. So that could be a concern with people out there foraging.
I also have met people as I'm riding along the bike path who are gathering food and can't understand what I'm saying to say, oh, this may have been sprayed. So
thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else that has comments, questions, tips? All right, well, feel free, if you don't want to speak here, to reach out to any of us after the meeting. We'd be happy to speak with you. So that leads us to item number 10, the Commission and Steering Committee Roundtable. I apologize during the check-in that because we are divided here, didn't ask the steering committee if they had any items that they wanted to add to the check-in. Any of you have any issues? Well, in thinking of now that Clay County is the host as chair of this committee, we've come a long way in the last, Kim, has it been 5 years since this committee has started meeting? And in preparation for that, I've had some conversations with different colleagues and members of the steering committee on where do we feel like the Food Commission is, and do you feel like we're addressing the issues in the mission statement? Do you feel like we're missing anything? A lot of faces around this table have changed. And I think it would be helpful, one, for members of the commission to take part in the steering committee meetings as well. Not all of us, one or two at a time. I'd be happy to join you at your commission or steering meeting on Monday. And I think the reason being is it will help us as a commission understand really what the thought process is with the steering committee, and help to shape how we move forward and how we in turn will relay those discussions to our jurisdictions. I'm completely open to comments from this board if you feel like that would be helpful or not. And I also feel like it would be probably helpful for us at the next meeting to have an agenda item to kind of give a snapshot, if you will, not just these snapshots of the blueprints that we have covered. And then I think it will help us understand how we've moved from food to sustainability and how it all intertwines together to be helpful. So comments? Feel like that may be
Sounds good to me.
appropriate way to go?
I'm supportive of that. I will say, to piggyback, putting together the presentation today is there are food and sustainability go hand in hand, and so I kind of meandered, I feel like, when I was first looking at what our community is doing too. So there's just a lot of things happening, so to have us all hitched up, so to speak, in the same direction would be really helpful.
Well, steering committee, feel free to, I don't think we have to have any one person appointed to that steering committee, but if you could, you know, whenever you feel like there's a meeting come up, grab one of us. And I know Kim and I have spoken this morning, and the thought process is that the steering committee will start having some individual meetings with members of the commission to gauge where everyone's at and get feedback on what we're doing and how we will in turn turn whatever we decide into policy or change, to, I guess, put it lightly. Okay. Anything else?
I have one other.
Yep.
This could maybe tie into this as well. I've spent my morning here. I also had the MAP bus meeting, as did Jim, so we've been hanging out here. I had reached out to Fargo City staff, and I first want to say thank you for them for hosting the commission meetings always in here. There's some limitations as far as spatial accommodation for us as the commission and also the steering committee to be physically closer together. So I don't know if we want to have a discussion right now or maybe put it on as an agenda item. I do think these opportunities, when we have a chance as multi-jurisdictional representatives to you know, increase our communication and build bridges and share notes with what we're doing in our community, are really valuable. And I would like to see us be able to have a little bit more engagement with the resources that they have. They do an awesome job communicating with us, and I think that these opportunities where we're all physically in the same room are so valuable. So I just wanted to let you know that my feelings about that, and see if we want to talk about it now or further discuss what accommodations we could have.
Commission wishes? I know we certainly can put it on for the March meeting. I think there's pluses and minuses to being in a large room, and I think Sarah and I have talked about that. I think the ability to have this broadcast and stream through Facebook and community access, I think, is very valuable, and I agree with you. However we do, it should capitalize on the assets of the steering committee as well.
Correct, yeah.
So possible agenda item for next time? Okay.
Thank you.
All right, any other things? I will also note that the Soil and Water Conservation District, the week of our next, or 7th through the 10th of February, will be having their tree week. So I think they've already sold 2,000 trees. So if anyone knows it, anyone that is wanting to buy some trees on a larger quantity scale, they will definitely do that for you then. Any other things for the round table? Anything else? So, commission action steps. I see our next First Fridays at Theater B. We missed the January just because of the new year. Will be February 7th. Those are great conversations that are happening. And I think residents, from what I've heard, have really appreciated the topics and the knowledge of the presenters. So if you can make that, that would be great. And then I see our next commission meeting will be March 11th. Here. Anything further? Steering committee, anything? All right, if not, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks.